Lynn.
Is this gonna work? You guys got that all right? All right, good. Hey, it's a real pleasure to be here. This is the first speech I've given. The actual reason I put this together is I had a student last year that suggested it to me. She kind of kept insisting that I should try to do something like this. So starting this summer, I wrote this thing up and finally got done with it. And with the help of some people like Mr. Gibbons and Mr. Joyce and others who've helped me along, this is the presentation I put together for you guys. First thing I'd like to tell you right off the bat, I think when presenters come here, one of the questions people have is like, what's the point? And I always like to ask when a presentation's done, like, what did you walk away with? So I think I want to get to that right from the beginning and tell you guys what the point of this presentation. And the point of the presentation is for you guys to consider really what the only question that any of us have to consider. I want you guys to think about that question today. I'm hoping we can have a conversation about it. And there's at least one idea that I want to share with you guys about the only question that really matters. Now, in life, you'll find that there are two sets of questions. This guy right up here, C.S. Lewis, he wrote the Narnia stories. He wrote a lot of Christian philosophy. And he said there are two kinds of questions in the world. There's one set of questions that have obvious answers, factual-based answers, objective questions. And these are the kinds of questions that you guys study when you're in school. Like, in other words, if I say to you, what's 2 plus 2? Everybody would say, 4. Thank you very much. And we would all agree on that. If I asked you guys what the capital of Montana is,
Helena.
you don't know. First. Right? But there is an answer. Does anybody actually know what the answer is?
Helena.
Helena, very good. So, but once we know what the answer is, we agree to it, there's nothing to debate, and we move on. And what C.S. Lewis has said about all these kinds of questions is, essentially, they're meaningless. They have no value in your life. Once you know the answers to them, you move on. It doesn't mean anything. But there's another set of questions that mean everything. And these kinds of questions are subjective questions, where there are no singular answers. These are the kinds of questions that all of us have to figure out the answers for ourselves. And it's in figuring out these answers to these questions that we define ourselves, that we make our lives. And of all these questions, the one that by far is the most important and the most obvious is this one. Your answer to that question, my answer to that question, it makes me who I am, it makes you who you are. This is what it's all about. And personally, I'm nothing special. I want to give everybody who knows me can vouch for that. I'm just a regular person like everybody else. I have had one extraordinary experience in my life, something that I never saw coming, that totally shifted my attention and shifted my focus and belief about what it is about, what is the meaning of our lives. And it happened at this particular place. And what happened there is what sent me into the world of philosophy and eventually psychology. It's eventually what brought me to here right now to give you guys this speech. At that particular place in Sedona, Arizona, a place called Bell Rock, I had an extraordinary experience. And by and large, it's really what I'm here to share with you guys today. Because it has a lot to say about this one question. What is the meaning of your life? So, with that being said, that question, above all things, is a philosophical question. It's the most philosophical question there is. So if we're going to approach the question, we should look at it in a philosophical light. And to do that, we have to start at the most basic level, which means this. What does the word philosophy mean? If we're going to look at this thing philosophically, we should at least know what the word means itself. Does anybody know what the word philosophy means? You guys have heard the word, right? Okay, what do you think it means?
Idea.
An idea?
Yep.
It's loaded with ideas, that's for sure. What's that? It's the love for study. It is the love of something. The word philo means love. It's a Greek word. It's made out of 2 words. And the word philo means love of. But the second word is actually from Sophia, you know the name Sophia, and it doesn't mean study. It means love of wisdom. Bingo. It means love of wisdom. So here we are. If we're going to answer this question, we have to consider what wisdom is. And I told this to my philosophy class this year when they asked what philosophy is. I said, philosophy is love of wisdom. And then somebody really smart in the class said, well, what's wisdom? Which again, all beginnings start with good questions. And so I tried to give the best answer I could. I'd obviously been contemplating philosophy for over 10 years and been teaching it and studying it. And I remembered some definitions I'd seen. And I said, wisdom is the search for the good, the true, and the beautiful. Which I think is a great answer. Not just because I said it, but I think that is a good answer. So, therefore, another conversation took place. And you guys might be able to imagine what it was. I'll tell you what it was anyways. The conversation that took place in the class was, well, what is good, true, and beautiful? Are these things even real? How do we know that these things exist? I mean, is what's good and true and beautiful good for one person but not good for another? Are there universal standards for these things that we can actually search for? Or does every person in every culture just make it up as we go along, make it up for themselves, or make it up for their society? In other words, on an island of cannibals, if you showed up and you're a non-cannibal, who's right? Who's living the good, the true, and the beautiful? The cannibals or the person that thinks they're wrong? That's moral relativism or universal norms? What do you guys think? Are there standards? Is there something good, true, and beautiful in the world? Or do we all make it up for ourselves? Well, I'll tell you my answer. My answer begins with this statement. There's a book in the Bible called Ecclesiastes. It was written a long time ago by somebody who's unknown. That's why there's a question mark over his face. And the book is filled with all this great wisdom, all these great ideas. It was written by a guy who's probably the first existentialist that's ever existed. He's the first person to try to figure out what the meaning of life is. And he takes us down this path where he says, is it money? Is it power? You know, what is it that leads to happiness for a person? And he leaves us with all these great ideas and all these great thoughts that's influenced scientists and philosophers and writers and artists. And one of the statements he leaves us with is this one: there is nothing new under the sun. So I want to ask you guys, and this is not rhetorical. In other words, I want you guys to participate in this. Do you think that's true? Is it true that there is nothing new under the sun? How many people think that that's true, that there's nothing new under the sun, that everything that's been has always been, so to speak? Just a very few of you? And how many of you guys think that there are new things under the sun? Okay, I need help on this. If you disagree with this guy, in other words, if you think there are new things under the sun, can somebody please tell me what those are? Tell us what those are? Yes?
I guess I'd say human thoughts can be new, different concepts that people think of.
What's that? Can you stand up? Do you mind?
Thoughts that humans have, they can be new. Things that teens think of.
Can you give me an example of a thought that would be new?
Like when we started inventing mathematics and things like that, we're all just organisms originally, but now we started all these ideas, science, everything like that. I guess that's new.
The number one answer against that question, that statement, is what you just said. It has to do with science, mathematics, technology, inventions. All of these things seem to be new. If you took somebody from the Middle Ages, you could take the most advanced person from the Middle Ages, plop them down in the middle of Times Square, and they would think they were on another planet. They would have no idea where the hell they were, or what happened. Because we've changed this world so radically through those ideas. So in that regard, you're right. There are some new things under the sun, like cars and planes and, fill in the blank, right? Medicines, etc., etc. Now, those of you, there were just a few of you, but those of you that said there was nothing new under the sun and you agreed with Mr. Ecclesiastes, why do you say that? Yes?
Well, I believe that,
Scary guy.
I kind of believe that ideas, they're not new, but they're altered. I kind of make the comparison between this concept and like a block of rock that you chip away at it. It kind of changes its form, but it's still the same old block. Keep on adding to it, but it doesn't change the foundation.
And that's why Matt's my brother. That's why I love him. Because I agree with Matt. I think that things may look different, but at the core, what it is to be a human being, what it is to be us, never changes. Because at our core, the things that matter are our ideas, literally. These kinds of things. It doesn't matter if you were around 2,000 years ago or if you were born yesterday. In the end, the things that matter in your life are these things. Love, fear, jealousy, trust, friendship, enemies, life, death. These are the questions, again, these are the subjective ideas that all of us have to define for ourselves. And it's what makes each of us unique. It's what defines us. So, that's what's meant by the human condition. When you guys read novels in literature, or you study paintings and art, or you listen to music, whether it's something written 1,000 years ago or something, again, written yesterday, what you're doing is you're studying how people are expressing themselves about what it is to be a person. And when it comes to being a person, and it comes to the question of what is the meaning of our lives, I've determined at least in my estimation, there are three tools we have to figure that question out. And I want to go over these with you guys today. And I want to lead you to that story of what happened to me in the desert so I can offer at least one, I think, positive answer to the question. First of all, when it comes to the meaning of our lives and it comes to what we are as people and how we search for what it's all about, the first thing we need to understand, if we're going to be honest with ourselves, is that we are completely free. It is completely up to us to determine what is the meaning of our lives. You can't blame anybody. You can't blame your upbringing. You can't blame where you start off. You can't blame the devil. You can't blame your desires. In the end, all of us are completely responsible for creating and defining our own lives. This is the fundamental fact, one of the fundamental facts about being a human being. And I don't know if you guys have ever heard this term before, but the term existentialism, which says what's important to us as far as our existence, it really stems from this concept. The two founders of existentialism are those two guys up on the screen right now. The guy on the left is Soren Kierkegaard. He was a Danish philosopher in the 19th century. The guy on the right is Jean-Paul Sartre, smoking his pipe, philosophical. He was a Frenchman in the 20th century. So he died in 1980, not too long ago. And both these guys, when they defined what it meant to be a human being, they focused on freedom. And they said the fundamental fact about being a person is different than the fundamental fact about being any other living thing on this planet. Because every animal on this planet doesn't get to choose. They are what they're born to be. We, on the other hand, we could turn out to be Adolf Hitler or Mother Teresa. It's not the same thing. So, to give you an example of this, there's a nice little fable I want to turn to. It's the fable of the scorpion and the frog. It's the story of the scorpion and the frog. They're at the edge of a riverbank that's over flooding. And they're both going to die if they don't get out of there. So the scorpion says to the frog, hey, let me hop on your back and then you can go from lily pad to lily pad, get out of here, we can both escape. And the frog says, that's crazy. If I let you on my back, you're going to sting me. And the scorpion says, that doesn't make any sense. If I sting you, we both die. And that logic convinces the frog, so the frog lets the scorpion on his back. And they start going across the river to safety. About halfway across, can you guys guess what happens?
He stings him.
He stings him.
Because it's in his nature.
That's right. Damn. So the frog looks up as he gets stung and he says, why did you do it? Why does the scorpion say he did it?
Because it's in his nature.
It's in his nature. What do scorpions do?
Sting shit.
They sting stuff. Right. Very good. What do lions do? They hunt. What do birds do? They fly, they migrate, right? They do what they're wired to do. They don't choose. It's not a Disney movie where animals have individual personalities and they go off in different directions. They don't do that. Animals' existence is their essence. What they are is what they do. We, on the other hand, we define ourselves. And we define ourselves by the choices we make. As a species, we completely change the world we live in through technology and science. We come across fields and meadows and we turn them into office buildings with computers in them. We completely alter our existence in the direction of our own visions. And what we do as a group, what we do as a species, we also do as individuals. And that's the point of freedom, is that you all, me, you, all of us, we get to decide. In essence, what this miserable German philosopher named Schopenhauer had to say about it is absolutely true. The world is nothing but what you believe it is. It's your idea. And so when it comes to the meaning of life, we got to choose wisely. Because whatever we define, we become. Whatever we call it, it is. Now the second part about being a human being, if you're going to be honest with yourself, and you're going to look at the world philosophically, which means, again, with a little bit of forethought, you're going to realize that as people, in this world that we live in, we really should be humble. And why should we be humble? What do you guys think? Why is humility a good thing? Why is that a powerful tool for us in our journey to find out what it's all about for us? Well, let me start by saying, if we're trying to be wise, we need to be focused in on what's good, true, and beautiful. And we should be humble because it's true. It's true. And here is our man Socrates, the founder of philosophy. And he's saying to all his friends, I am an idiot. You ever hear what Socrates is famous for saying? He knew. What did Socrates know he knew? Nothing. Socrates knew he knew nothing. And that made him wiser than everybody else. And he was trying to convince people that you think you know so much, but you haven't even thought about the things you think you know. You haven't considered the ideas like justice and fairness. The Greeks thought they were so great, and yet they didn't let women leave the house, and they had slaves left and right. And they conducted wars that were total wars against their enemies. and yet they thought they knew it all. And Socrates was trying to tell his people, no, you really need to think about it. You really need to realize that you don't know anything. That's the starting point. And it's a fact. There are billions of galaxies with hundreds of billions of stars. And all of these stars, and most of them, have solar systems around them, with many planets. I looked it up. According to one estimate I saw, that's how many planets there are in the universe. You guys see that number? Anybody know what that number is? It's not a billion. I have no idea, but if I could reach up, I'd show you where we are. Do you know how many planets you experience? One. So you see that gigantic number? Put a 1 at the very end of it. That's all you know. That's all I know. So how can we be so cocky about what we think is real or what we think is right or wrong? We obviously need to start from a place of humility if we're going to be honest with ourselves about what we know. And one of the greatest philosophers in history understood this. His name was Baruch Spinoza. He was a Dutch philosopher in the 1600s. And he created this concept called the perspective of eternity. He said, if we are going to be kind to ourselves and to other people, we have to start at this place of humility, realizing that we just live in this one particular moment, and we just have this one opportunity to gain as much knowledge as we possibly can, to be as kind and to forgive people and to forgive ourselves as much as possible. And while Spinoza was fighting for things like free speech and freedom of religion, his neighbors were rounding each other up and slaughtering each other as witches, because they know that there is such a thing as witches in the 1600s. So much so that about 100,000 people were killed in this manner. So on one hand, you have Spinoza fighting for freedom, realizing we should be humble in our pursuit of knowledge. On the other hand, you have these kinds of people who are always out there, and they're the people that really, I'm hoping as you guys get older, that you don't become a victim to. These are the dogmatists. These are the people that say they know exactly what the truth is. And dogmatists have always been the scariest people on this planet because they attack other people for not believing in the same things. Again, the fact of the matter is none of us can ever be certain of what we know. And so we need to give each other a break. And we need to search in a humble way for what the truth is. My man Nietzsche, again, another guy that Matt likes. Nietzsche put it really well. Again, as you go into college, I really, really, really emphasize that you try not to be an ideologue. You try to think for yourself. Keep an open mind. Keep a free mind. Because as Nietzsche said, insanity is rare in individuals. But in groups, parties, nations, and epochs, it is the rule. So, with that being said, these ideas are the ideas we have to figure out for ourselves. Don't let anybody else tell you what they are. And I know this is a little bit of a contradiction, but as I continue, I am going to share one idea that proves itself, I think, over and over again. Who is that? Oh my God. Who is that? What a handsome guy. Long time ago, about 20 years ago, that was me, like you guys are now. It's, I think, my senior year picture in high school. And like all of us, like all of you guys now, I was ruled by a certain belief in what I thought the world was all about. In philosophy, we call this metaphysics. Metaphysics is whatever our theory of reality is. And for most of us, we get at least a chunk of our version of what a reality is from our religion. And I grew up Catholic, which meant that I believed in the Catholic version of reality. And the Catholic version of reality went something like this, and it goes something like this. There's an all-powerful, benevolent, which means kind God, that has created all of us, and He's kind of given us a test. He's told us what the rules are, like the 10 Commandments. And He tells us if we follow these rules correctly, then we'll end up in a beautiful place called heaven forever. If we don't follow these rules, we end up in hell, which is a horrible place forever. And I genuinely believed this as a kid growing up. And then all of that changed. It changed for me because I had a friend who came down with a psychological disorder known as schizophrenia. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with that particular psychological disorder, but it's a real tough one. It's a real bad one. And my friend and I, we had a lot in common. We played sports together. We went on double dates together. We were really close. He shared his dreams with me and his fears, and vice versa. We obviously, we loved each other, we cared about each other. And then one day, I got a phone call, and I was told that my friend was in a mental hospital. because he'd been stricken with this thing and he had like a psychotic episode. And I went and visited him there, and the person I found was not the person that I had left before. He was filled with these voices in his head. He had these delusions, and he believed that there were conspiracies all around him. His world had become a nightmare, a living nightmare. And so I continued to visit him over the next year, and sometimes I'd find him catatonic, generally non-responsive. Other times I'd find him where he was manic, and he was going on and on about these conspiracies against him. And, obviously his friends and his family, we tried everything we could to help him. He took medication. He had some different kinds of therapies. And eventually there was a lot of hope because he started to get better. And when he got better, we would talk about these things. We would talk about what he had been going through. And he'd realize how far off of reality he was when he was in those delusions. And unfortunately, however, one morning I woke up and he was pacing. He was in my bedroom. I woke up surprised to find him walking in my room. And he was full-blown in one of these episodes. He'd stopped taking his medication, unbeknownst to me and his family. And he was now full-blown in one of these delusional episodes. And he was talking about these conspiracies and how these people were doing this to him and how he's going to get these people back. And I was stuck with a dilemma, and anybody who's ever dealt with anybody with schizophrenia faces this kind of dilemma. And that is, if you tell the person that the delusion is right, obviously you're fueling it. You're making the delusion stronger. On the other hand, if you tell the person that they're wrong, that what they're thinking isn't real, then you face possible consequences of them turning against you. And that's what happened. So I woke up and I was groggy and I said, no, Jerry, that stuff you're talking about isn't real. We already talked about this, that didn't happen. Those people aren't doing that, et cetera, et cetera. And then he got mad at me. He turned against me and he said, they got to you too. He thought I was in on the conspiracy against him. And I said, Jerry, I love you, man. I wouldn't go against you. I'm with you. You know that. And then, he calmed down for a second and he said, yeah, I know, Mark. I love you. You're a good guy. And he left my house. And sadly, for me and him and his family and his friends, he took his life later that day. Which brings me to God. Because then I was left with a question in my mind. And the question was this: where was God? I've been taught that God was benevolent. I taught that he was all-powerful. And yet here was a guy who hadn't hurt a fly. He was a great guy. And he was gone. Put through this torturous episode and then taken from all of our lives. You'd never be able to experience the same things I experienced. And it just didn't seem fair or right to me. Which brings us to one of the philosophical questions that we have. And most philosophical questions, you'll find out as you think about them, only have 1, 2, or 3 answers. There's not a lot to pick from. When it comes to the question of God and whether God is real, the question we have in front of us is answered by these 3 options. You can either be a theist, which means you believe in God. You can be an agnostic, which means I don't know. Or you can be an atheist, which means you believe there is no God. Again, out of curiosity, I'd like to know how many people believe in God. How many people are theistic in this room? Me too. How many people are atheistic, do not believe in God, or believe there is no God? Again, because of Spinoza and the rest of us, it doesn't matter how you see it, because we're all free to think how we like, thank God, in America, because we've had great people like Spinoza overcome the dogmatists over time. And lastly, how many people are agnostic? You just don't know. Very, very good. Mr. George, you're an agnostic. Nice to meet you. Okay, well, with those 3 options in front of you, after my friend Jerry died, I couldn't believe in God at that particular moment. Because I believed that a God that was good would have been around and he wouldn't have let that happen. So I lost my faith in God at that moment. I was about 18, 19 years old, similar to you guys, I guess. So then I was stuck between atheist and agnostic. Well, there's too much beautiful stuff in the world for me to be an atheist. I couldn't go there. Babies being born, puppy dogs, you name it. Falling in love. There's a million things that are so beautiful in this world that there's no way I could possibly imagine that there wasn't some divine power behind it. At least I couldn't cancel them out. So I didn't go as far as atheist, and I landed on agnostic. In other words, I didn't know. And I remained in that place of I don't know for the next 15 years of my life, until I arrived at this particular mountain in Sedona. And it's this story that really is the impetus for the speech, and I guess more